that we have this time of this day a renewed opportunity to call on thy holy and ever blessed name. And we give thanks that you have moved the hearts of those that run this committee, that we seek you as the first thing we do before all the business of the day, Lord. That we see this as a huge privilege to call on your holy name, to seek wisdom, guidance and understanding on the order of the day and all the business that affects each and every one of us and our communities that we seek to represent, Lord. We would ask you to be with us today, Lord. And as I said, we cannot measure the extreme privilege it is to call on you, Lord, the one who has made all things in 6 days, who within you we have our being, Lord. And we can see the wonderful creation that you have made, that this is not enough for us to have that relationship, that saving knowledge, that you give hope to the world, Lord. And at the moment we have a fallen world that seems to have no hope. But there is hope in the cross at Calvary, Lord, where our Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ on that day died for our sins, for whosoever would believeth in him would not perish, but would have everlasting life. And on that day, Lord, grace shone so bright, although the Calvary was enveloped in darkness. And Lord, that hope still shines brightly for anyone who seeks a Saviour. For this world really needs a Saviour at this moment, Lord. We pray for the committee and the council at this time. We pray for the chair and the vice chair. We'd ask you to bless them, Lord, as they steer this committee through the business of the day. We give thanks for them. We pray for the clerk and thank her for all her work that she does in organising the administration of the committee, Lord. We give thanks for all the director and all the officers that are involved in presenting reports, Lord, and all the work that goes into these reports, Lord. We give thanks for them, and we give thanks that you have bestowed skills and experience that they are using to better the lives of the people of the islands, Lord. Lord, we pray for our committee, Lord, the members of our committee at this time and all the communities they represent. We also think of those who are sick and who are struggling, whether it be physically, mentally, or even spiritually, Lord. We think of our colleague, Councillor John A. McKeever, who is recovering from his operation, Lord. We give thanks that the operation was a success, Lord, and we pray that you would be with him and draw close to him, Lord, that he would know your healing hand upon him. And we give thanks for you, Lord, for bringing him to a better state of health, Lord. We pray for others that we know of in our communities, Lord, that are struggling. We pray that you would draw near to them as well, Lord. Lord, we pray for the decisions that we make today. We ask you to bless them, Lord, and how we come to them in a gracious way, Lord, discussing different opinions and coming to the right decisions, Lord. We give thanks for the community we live in and all the blessings you've given us, Lord, and we ask you now to go before us and forgive all our sins for Jesus' sake. Amen.
Alex Mashalmurach, and can you niche the Huarich? As Manasabish, a secular Yovach, Chimahan, can you the Coperich have the microphone size, phonish and wiver, as a have teams, a secure Yovach in the real chin, Chimish with a shin, and Alec Miles, the Yevach shin, a mach, a rast. And a divery quar u, Femi Boyle, and Homer Akel, noch Crioch, Criochachur, Eastjoch, for voor Parwilschuif. Hees cwsbertria diag y gafel an y diafr, na chanw oes bechor dofail y committee, oes ofricyn hymwch i fwyrwch oes iorin wwch compasht elle yn chanw aga. So cwrin cwtioch nad canw gyfel yn chanw gofi i'r fyr chwarags nad yr lion y chwle as jai yn chanw creoch. So before I proceed to the formal agenda, I'd just like to make some remarks. I'd like to pay tribute to Mr. Murdo Mackay, who was our Economic Development Manager and who has recently retired from the Cona after 21 years of service. Murdo was employed with the Economic Development Service since 2004, first as an Economic Development Officer leading on crofting and land resources, and since 2007 in the post of Economic Development Manager, overseeing support to projects including the Hebridean Way, our arts and creative industries support, and the Casa Grounds Regeneration Project, Harris Tweed Industry support, and a wide range of other initiatives. Murdo possessed a wealth of expertise on crofting and legislation and land management issues, which were of great value to the Cona, and his contribution to the authority has been greatly appreciated. And we wish Murdo all the very best in his retirement, and we were all valued his counsel and advice at committee over the years. I'd also like to congratulate Mary Ann Graham, who has recently been appointed to the role of Homelessness Manager, and we look forward to working with Mary Ann in the future. Can I also refer to our committee member and colleague and friend, Councillor John A. McKeown, as Mr. Murray mentioned in his prayer, who's recovering from surgery. I'd like to wish him all the very best in his recovery. And we also welcome back Councillor McLean, who has also recovered from surgery. I think the post of Councillor for Walker 2 Award should come with a health warning in the future, given our record this year. So, sin is gwasad gyda Gar Counterson, cwsbar y hyn, Gar Counters cynnu y siech gwad i ac yn y ogfias. As sy'n son yntachych. Apeloi. Cwsbar y ga, cwar ma ag bail an y cwsbar sy'n bi, fydd y chwar oproch, by chwar gaif sy'n y chwarach, fi cha ffeimbl na nisich bail yn over wilad chwarach sy chwsbar. Dyna Meister Morriston.
Thank you, Chair. In item 11 at 6.2, I declare an interest as part of the North Harris Stalking Club and their deer management.
Okay, I'm hier kwar en een kusper de Siar. Es gaga we na vaun ra uda stjorna var spimi fakeling hanu is on een kusper syns bi ma shortonoch gaveling her. Ek time person. Okay, syns goed kusper 3 to the sok in is gau project data ook turish. Is on bergig een huis aan een daimri taspunig to the sok in is gau is torigen project data ook turish. Brini Karen ni gruari, die zijn huis is vragtig kisten te bij. Ham ik kujog tollish falje cureert Sera Nikilian is Sue Reed van de William Tourstock in is gauw is gutash van het hoort shechet een project. Ach een horsach Karin Dovrien die zijn huis.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this report just relates to the visitor data project led by the Outer Hebrides Tourism in partnership with the Edinburgh Napier University, which was supported through CLD funding. So the work responds to the lack of up-to-date visitor information since 2017 and has developed a more sustainable, repeatable model for gathering and examining data. So the findings give us a clear picture of these visitor numbers, spend and trends, and will help inform future planning and investment in tourism. So I'll now hand you over to OHT to present their findings in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Siar and Sue. Please proceed. Welcome. Is your light on? Sorry, your light is
Oh,
red. Yeah, that's
yes.
it. Sorry about that.
No, not at all. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come along and present a bit of an update to you all on the position of and performance of tourism in the islands today. I'm Sarah McLean, Chief Executive of Visit Outer Hebrides, and this is my colleague Sue, who is Chair of the organisation. I will take you through a wee bit of context, then hand over to Sue, who's going to present to you the main kind of headlines from the data update. And then we're going to take a couple of minutes to look at where we are in terms of kind of opportunities, but also challenges facing the sector at the moment. Oh, here we go. So it's a good news story overall. We are an attractive place to come, a bucket list destination, if you will, as reflected in the accolade received this year from National Geographic, which picked us out as one of the 25 best places on the planet to visit. This not only has that financial benefit and supports our economy, and especially our rural communities, some of the more remote parts of the islands where other economic opportunities are sparse and our repopulation challenges are most critical, are areas where tourism thrives. But it has a general effect on community confidence, which has been evidenced through many research pieces, which shows that if somewhere is seen as an attractive, well-managed destination, then it makes people feel that there is a good quality of life there, and it helps to sustain other sectors and industries. So just going back slightly, I will speed through this bit, but around 20, 30 years ago, there was a big period of change in tourism in the islands. The picture there on the right is the first cohort of welcome host trained customer service personnel in the islands, who pictured at the newly completed Garnan Black Houses on the west side of Lewis. There was a lot of investment in heritage assets, so we were professionalising as an industry. It was easier to get to the islands thanks to RET, and it was easier to get around the islands. This coincided with a national policy change, which saw the Scottish Tourist Board disbanded, along with its regional tourist board structure, and Visit Scotland stepping in to plug that national gap as the new body selling Scotland to the world. So Visit Scotland replaced the Scottish Tourist Board at a national level. At a local level, there was a gap, and into that gap came Outer Hebrides Tourism. I'll clarify just now that we use both Visit Outer Hebrides and Outer Hebrides Tourism. Visit Outer Hebrides has always been our kind of public brand for visitors, and we're increasingly using that, so we have one cohesive name that our visitors and our community recognise. But Outer Hebrides Tourism, as we were back in 2005 when we were established, was set up to create a cohesive island tourism network, bringing businesses together with the aim of promoting the islands as a destination within Scotland and looking to develop effective relationships with partner agencies, which I'm delighted still continues to this day through the Tourism Leadership Group. So what do the last 20 years look like? The Hebridean Way was mentioned there when Councillor Crichton was paying tribute to Murdo Mackay's efforts. That's been a huge success for us. It brings thousands of people to the islands. As I said, it's a good example of where it extends tourism from Battersea in the south right through to Ness in the north. And it is a shared asset where the Comhairle own the infrastructure and we at Visit Outer Hebrides promote to visitors. Our cultural tourism offer is strong, as strong as it's ever been. Again, another partnership with the Comhairle made in the Outer Hebrides started here within the Comhairle's economic development team, and we took it over in 2023, promoting even the smallest arts and crafts makers. Our cultural tourism and events is world leading, which is reflected in the many awards, and obviously Harris Tweed is another globally recognised brand. Food and drink is another area which over the last 5 years in particular, we have seen a huge growth and recognition in as a driver of tourism. We have won some significant awards, which we're very proud of, reflecting the work that's gone in there. We're currently the only organisation with a dedicated food and drink officer in the islands, and we take our role in networking local food and drink businesses really seriously. You all have in front of you a copy of our new strategy document. The original Shala strategy was to run from 2020 to 2030. Obviously, the world has changed a great deal since that was put together in 2019. So we felt this mid-decade point was a good time to update and review and see what was fit for purpose going forward to 2030. So all of that is within the document you have, and it's also available on our website. And beyond that, we also feed into a number of other strategy and policy areas relating to tourism locally and nationally. So I'm going to hand over to Sue, who is going to take you through the headlines, and then we will look at the challenges and opportunities.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to do this today for you. So thank you to that funding that we received earlier this year. We have now got fantastic up-to-date statistics available to show the worth of the sector. The last survey was done in 2017, and we have found a way forward where we don't have to have people on the streets with clipboards counting visitors in and out. And thanks to the work with Edinburgh and Napier, we can now present the data to you. It's essential that we do have data to show the worth of the industry, but also to people that want to invest in the industry. So I'm delighted to tell you that we are now at 33, I can't even say that figure, but there we go. 333,000 visitors come to our islands each year. That is an increase of 53% since 2017. We split that into what we call day visitors. In our case, being an island, that's mostly cruise, but also visitors staying overnight. And on average, the guys that come here tend to go up through the islands or down through the islands, and they're staying on average for 6 nights. With the deep water port, cruise is on the increase, and last year we saw 57,000 cruise passengers coming into Stornoway. What does that mean in terms of money? So in 2017, tourism was accounting for about 10% of the local economy at 65 million. Today, we're looking at £81.5 million, and that's an increase of about 25% since 2017. If we look at that in terms of overall economic output of the islands, then we're looking at approximately 16% of that output is coming from the tourism sector. We can split that into domestic and international guests. So you can see 66 are domestic visitors coming from the whole of the UK. And we can see that 26 of those come from Scotland. And then the remainder are international guests, accounting for about 34%. All of that is being provided. They need to stay somewhere, and we can analyse the industry here quite easily from existing databases and updating those. And we can see that we have approximately a capacity to house or to sleep overnight 7,890 visitors at a time. That is being provided by with 1,246 providers split across hotels, B&Bs, camping, etc. Each year we analyse the occupancy of that, and we can see that we have a year occupancy of about 57%. That is a slight decrease on 2013. And you can also look at where our seasonality comes in, with the vast majority of people coming to these islands between April and October, where occupancy is about 70%. All of that is done over, and then we can do the calculations to show where that comes from. Importantly, we can then split it per island group. And it's the last column I'd like you to have a quick look at, and how important tourism is to these island groups. And obviously you're going to say that I'm going to point out to you Harris. So over 40% of the economy of Harris is completely down to tourism. So it is quite vital to that particular part of our island. And we know this because we can analyse bed stock availability, occupancy rates, travel data, etc. So if we look at us and compared to the whole of Scotland, you know, where are we compared in the national picture? For Scotland, the industry is worth £11.4 billion. And we have about 92 million visitors coming into Scotland each year. Therefore, our share is quite small. It's just over 1%. When I looked at this, I was quite disappointed that. I was hoping it to be a wee bit higher. But then when I think about it, you're up against Edinburgh and the big giants that those cities bring in. However, we can conclude that here it is about 60% of the economy. It is a growing industry. It is highly seasonal. Most of the work is done between April and October. And most of it is provided for by small accommodation providers, so owner-operators, very small scale, micro businesses. But those 1,246 businesses are providing around 7,900 bed spaces. Capacity is naturally constrained here because we're an island and people can only get here on the ferry or by air. And the biggest conclusion that we can take away from today is that the second biggest sector in the Outer Hebrides.
Thank you, Sue. I'm sure you'll all agree there's some big figures to take in there and get our heads round, but it is generally a positive story. And as Sue said, a growing industry. And I would add that as well as potentially being, as far as we know, the second biggest sector in terms of value, we are fairly sure that it is still the biggest employer in the islands in terms of private sector employment. The slide I have up at the moment is taken from our operating plan, and I'm just going to leave it there for a couple of more seconds, but it's really just to give an indication of the kind of things that we try and take account of as an organisation when we're looking at how we manage these 333,500 visitors. It is 13, 14 times the population, the resident population of the islands. It is a big challenge, and we have to get the balance between promotion and marketing and protecting place and environment right, as well as taking the community with us and representing different areas and keeping them in balance. This is just a bit of an overview of how we do that, the various things we're involved in, some of which I've mentioned already. It is a very broad area. Tourism touches many, many parts of our economy and many, many different parts of our island. So we are constantly working to be responsive on a number of fronts. Examples I can quickly give you are the Place campaign, which encourages good behaviour when people are here. I'm sure many of you have heard from residents in your wards about, poor visitor behaviour or things which sparks frustration. We are trying to tackle that through online and in place signage and messaging that asks people to be considerate and to follow various access codes and to remember to protect the community and the environment. We've also stepped up in the last year to fill the gap left by Visit Scotland's closure of the Eye Centre network across Scotland. We were very fortunate to be able to enter into a good partnership with Lewis Crofters Limited, and there was also flexibility of support from the council, so thank you for that. And it has been a good success, and we reckon we were around about the 10,000 mark for those first four months of operation. So that's 10,000 people in the door and supported with visitor info. Doesn't just stop in Stornoway either. We do work with a network of businesses and community organisations the length of the islands who are all play a part in various ways in visitor information and messaging, and we try to support them with resources and information and whatever they may need, and that's all done free of charge. In the background to all of that, the kind of day job is keeping the website going, which is a bit of a beast, over 300 pages of information, the main destination website, which tells people over 2.2 million hits of information a year in terms of what to do here, how to get here, talks about our culture, the different island geographies, a lot of information in there, including member listings and some specific information around different areas of interest. Our digital presence and our communication channels with visitors are large. These have been grown over the 20 years we've been operational, and we encourage partners and members to use that platform that we have to communicate either their business offer or any other relevant messaging. We're happy to share that access that we have. We have 600 member businesses at the moment, which makes us by far the biggest business network in the islands. We are very proud of that and have worked hard to build that up. However, I think coming back to Sue's statistic around there being 1,200 units of accommodation available to let in the islands, we are aware that is probably only about 40% of tourism businesses in the islands who subscribe into what we do, meaning there's 60% who benefit from the work we do around industry who don't buy into what we do. We are led by a voluntary board, and we do it all through a small but highly efficient team of 3.5 full-time equivalent staff. So what are our challenges? We know that travel and tourism is sensitive to market pressures, and we're not excluded from that. It can be cost of living, it can be socio-political factors, but very often travel and tourism is pinched first. We know that we have to keep on the front foot with changes in the digital world. I think a statistic I heard recently was 90% of all travel and tourism planning is now done online. So the need to have something that keeps pace with AI and keeps us relevant and accurate is always there. And we also know that locally we have a very imminent challenge in terms of the very likely, in fact, almost inevitable tourism disruption that will come to the Lewis and Harris market when the energy infrastructure projects that are planned start to roll out. So we're already talking to partners around that. We want to navigate it and we want to survive it so that we still have a healthy industry in 5-10 years' time. But our more immediate challenges are that we are no longer financially sustainable. And in this respect, we are a victim of our own success in that what we used to be able to do with a little bit of membership income and some healthy grants that were able to support a couple of projects every year, and we could do with 1 or 1.5 staff, tourism has now grown to a stage where that is no longer feasible. We have an increased demand for our services. We have an increased responsibility to our community as the numbers coming every year rise. And this growth has coincided with public sector contraction, where there is less financial support available. And we've also, as alluded to elsewhere in the presentation, we've stepped up and taken on other services that previously were provided by partners. So the finances, our budget for this year, our operating budget is around the 200,000 mark. Like most organisations, most of that is staffing. We spent around 20% on service delivery, including the digital and the website. And this year, around 10% of our budget has gone on running visitor information in Stornoway. So where does that come from? This is an overview of our income. So we have that 90,000, which, as I say, is the 40% of the tourism enterprises who buy in. That's where we're not sustainable. I'm sure you know yourselves, the council couldn't get by on only charging council tax to 40% of islanders. The port wouldn't only charge harbour dues to 40% of the boats coming in. We don't have a mechanism by which we can not get round that, but it is a challenge. We only have that 40% buy-in. So we're always promoting to the community. We generate a little bit of income through some merchandise sales that we do online mostly, and we are successful most years in bringing in some grant support, but ring-fenced to specific activity. We do not receive core funding from any of the other organisations on the slide. There is nobody at a strategic, political, whatever you want to call it, level buying back into supporting tourism locally on a kind of core funding basis. I have highlighted the council and Stornoway Port there as members because there is a small, very, very small amount that comes in every year just to make sure that we continue to market things like the museum and the marina, but it is not core support. Those of you who are doing the maths will see that there's a gap between what we bring in and our operating costs. And for the last couple of years, we have plugged that through reserves, and the reserves are now pretty much empty. So we have a big, big challenge on our hand. So we know there are still opportunities. We don't want this to come across as negative, but we have to be realistic, even if it's worst case scenario planning, that we survive another year, use up the last of the reserves, and that's the end of it. We have to start planning with partners like yourselves how we manage the gap that will be left. We know we're still a desired destination. We know there continues to be welcome investment in capital assets such as the Island's growth deal, destination development, deep water terminal, but we are now at a tipping point where we can't just keep creating more assets that attract people in without some kind of equivalence of investment in how we manage those people. We know that there is, as I say, unprecedented investment opportunity coming, and some sectors of our tourism industry stand to benefit directly from that. There are others who will be sorely pinched. And we see it as a chance, going back to the sort of, 30 years ago, 20 years ago period of change. We see that we're at a similar space now. So what is needed? We need around about 100,000 a year from somewhere, whether it's additional membership or sponsorship or investment. We're open to ideas, and that is less than 1% of the sector's value to the local economy. So we think it's worth trying to find it from somewhere. We are not asking the council directly for cash. We are well aware that there are no budgets here, but we see you as critical partners who can help us potentially build buy-in and membership both at a community level, trying to encourage that missing 60% to pay their £80 or £120 or £200 a year, which makes the difference to us. But also encouraging buy-in from strategic partners in light of the kind of wider economy and some of the bigger partners that we could be working with. So that's the presentation. That's where we're at in terms of where we are as an industry. That's where we're at in terms of the data, and that's where we're at in terms of as an organisation. I think that was probably more than 20 minutes, so apologies. But thank you very much for your time, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you both for that comprehensive presentation. Members have any questions or observations? Councillor Kenneth Lodge, Naherach.
Thank you very much for that. Some very interesting figures there, and encouraging to see the growth in tourism. I have to admit that I benefit from that. My own business is largely based on tourism as well. So it's great to see the number of visitors. And it's quite a significant figure, 1.5 million contribution or spend in the sector. The wording and the way it was described was very important to me there, because from your membership number, how many of them are actually island based? Because obviously there's a difference between what the spend is and what the benefit it is actually for the island economy. And for us as a council, it's important to have that accurate figure, because if we're looking for assistance from Scottish Government or from others, we don't want them to turn around and say, well, you're getting 81 million from tourism, when actual fact it's probably closer to half of that, because so many operators live off island. I know, for example, in Harris, where I'm based, a large percentage of the accommodation providers don't live on island. So a large chunk of the spend on that does not happen in our economy, it doesn't stay in our economy. And that's what's important. And I think as a council, it's important that we get these figures exact right, that are actually contributing to our economy rather than just a spend in the tourism economy in the Western Isles. So are you able to say how many roughly, well, what percentage of your members are island based as opposed to living on the mainland? And I mean, it's a mix of islanders and others, but actually the money goes off island.
Yeah.
Thank you. I can't give you a figure at the moment, but certainly two things that I would say in response would be, one, we know that the 81.5 million is what we have estimated around direct spend. So that's what we know through direct accommodation spend, and then the Visit Scotland's standard figure that they've worked out for kind of additional spend, which people on average spend every day that they're on holiday. So that's where we've got to the 81.5 million. There is then a multiplier effect, which is much harder to identify, which suggests that probably the 81.5 is much bigger, because that's where it goes into other areas of the community through supply chain and support services. So I suspect you're absolutely right in terms of the 81.5. It's probably less than that stays on island, but then there is probably probably goes back up again as the multiplied effect takes effect. I think what we need to do, and something we're talking to the Comhairle and other officers about through the leadership group, is we really need as the next bit of data work an economic impact assessment. So what we've done with the Edinburgh and Napier is really look at existing data sets and try to use those, so our own occupancy figures, existing information around accommodation availability, CalMac carrying statistics, and we've kind of melded them together and to give us the overview we have, which is really useful, but it doesn't go too deep. What we really need next is a proper, thorough consultant-led economic impact assessment that would give us an idea of exactly the kind of detail that you're asking for around how much money where does the money spend go, what is the multiplier effect, how many businesses are based on island, how many are owned by people off island, and all of that could come through an economic impact assessment. So we're hopeful that that will be the next step.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, hopefully, yeah, I think it is. It's important. On their accommodation, the additional spend that they're going to be doing during their week here is probably not tourism in general for the whole of Scotland. That, and is it maybe a case that, as you made a point there, most stuff is done online now, that the need for visitor support is not there, and the funding for it isn't being supported by national government, and it makes the case very harder to try and effectively justify your existence, which is I think is what you're trying to say.
Tap alive. Hier Niach Carroch, Manchatono.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks for that, Sarah and Sue. A couple of questions. I noticed on your slide that you didn't get anything from the Scottish Government twice. I don't know, was that unapplied criticism of the Scottish Government? I was going to ask the same question. Now that we don't have a Visit Scotland office in the town, I've gone round and asked how people are getting on because of the impact of the cruise business that's coming into the middle of town, and all of the shops that are trying to cater for that particular market are being used as visitor information centres. A lot of their time is taken up with dealing with tourist inquiries, as well as the spend that they're getting. You know, they're obviously dealing with a lot of inquiries that probably should have done with a local tourist office. Is there anywhere else that's getting support from Scottish Government outside of the Visit Scotland offices they've closed? Are there any other areas that you're aware of that do receive support from Visit Scotland? That was question one. And question two is, of the non-members that operate tourism business on the island, do you direct business towards them when they inquire?
Okay.
So,
can you wait till hang on to you. Excuse me.
Oh, sorry. In answer to your first question, yeah, an awful lot of our retail are acting as tour ambassadors. Yeah, I mean, they're pointing them in the directions of where to go, you know, how to get to the stones, etc. That's a natural part of being in, you know, a visitor town, I suppose. But it is an issue. The short answer is no, nobody is getting any money from Visit Scotland. Yeah, Visit Scotland have a development officer here at Victoria, but that's about it. And no, I don't believe any other organisation is getting support from Visit Scotland.
No, there isn't any core funding mechanisms, and we are aware of a number of fellow DMOs who have recently closed. The picture is quite bleak. Skye no longer has a DMO, neither does Caithness and Sutherland. I think Murray's has also gone, and the vast majority of these bodies have been absorbed either into sort of Chamber of Commerce type organisations or into local councils. So it's been slightly different in different areas, but there is no core source of funding. There was an approach made to Scottish Government a couple of years ago when we could see this coming. There was no response, no financial response. Some of the less robust structures, as I say, have gone already, and now we can see it on the horizon. Every area is different. And I think my own instinct is that there is still a sense at a political level, at quite a high political level, that Visit Scotland is there as the national tourism organisation, therefore it does tourism, but it does a very specific area of tourism. It does digital support and it does international marketing. So that's not a criticism of Visit Scotland. It does what it does very well, but its remit is not in supporting regional activity, and it's not in supporting visitor management, and it's not in providing visitor information, and they've been very clear on that.
Okay.
Oh, you say that, do you remember?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
Someone needs to put their mics off. No one.
Yeah, the second point I was asking was, are you directing traffic towards people who are not your members? Because if they're not contributing to you, why are you helping them?
It's a balance.
This is the big question. Online, we only represent our members. So our member listings on our website are only our own members. Until very recently, we did have blank listings, as it were. So we would have a business up there, but it would sort of be watermarked with not a member, and it was just a contact, and there was no information about the businesses. We took the policy decision a couple of years ago. We could no longer afford to do that, so we took those non-member listings down. I mentioned the challenges of AI. We're finding that increasingly we need to figure out new ways of staying kind of one step ahead, because if you put in accommodation in call into your search engine, you don't need to go through websites anymore. You'll know yourselves that AI just gives you the answer at the top of the page. So we need to work, but it sources all that information from websites like ours. So there's a piece of work there around how we continue to stay relevant, which brings in both non-members and members. I think in terms of the visitor centre, we started off on the footing that we would promote members first, and it has proven impossible, because that's the other side of what we do, is that we're there to be a resource to visitors. So if you have people coming in who are desperate to see the Callanish stones, or they've only got a couple of hours in Stornoway and they just want to see a Highland cow or buy a tweed handbag, and that's their focus, you are not going to say, you're not going to keep secret what you know about where they could do these things, because they're not members. That just doesn't work on a human level. So when we have people in front of us in the visitor centre looking for information, we would share any information we have that will make that visitor experience better, regardless of whether the people we're signposting to are members or not. So, but then that does on the other side leave us with an operational challenge. So a lot of what we do is to wider industry benefit, and I'm not sure how we square that circle.
Okay, thank you. Koning Donnacher, maak je neus?
Hi, thanks very much, Sarah, for your presentation. From a core point of view, you know, the change that has happened recently has been the licensing of all commercial premises. And it's clear, you see, when you say there are 1,200 or roughly there at the moment, you know, there was probably the core thought that we're talking about half that amount in the earlier stages. So what I'm looking at is that by a rather simple licensing scheme, which most people should have been compliant with regards to public liability, checking all the equipment, and that should have been done by everyone anyway, if they were accepting money off that. Is that an opportunity of having a look at expanding things when, you know, do you put a flyer to non-members on the benefits that you provide? Because on the Chorus website, there is everyone that is licensed now. That's public knowledge. That's available to everyone. So anyone who's out in tourism can just go onto the council's website and see all the premises that are licensed. So do you send a flyer around? Because if you're looking at 50%, you know, even if you'd get 10 to 20% of those, you know, if you'd put a flyer around and explain the benefits and all the marketing that you are doing, I'm sure a percentage of those would be attracted to you, join your organisation.
So is that, what's you?
Thank you. Yes, we do a sort of continual kind of promotion to new members. I don't think we have directly used the short-term Let's Register for that. I'm not sure if anybody here can advise if we would be allowed to. We would love to if we can. Obviously, there are, you know, various data protection things that might mean we can't do it directly, but I think that's very much where that sort of play at the end of the presentation around helping us to gain that buy-in, you know, even if it is some way around that, those kind of things that would allow us to access that database, that would be amazing. You know, as I say, we do promote regularly. We, you know, a lot of what we put out, about half of what we put out in terms of information is member only information newsletters, but we do also reach out with, you know, there are some wider things. For instance, when we were supporting around the discussions on visitor levy, we made a point of including all industry in that. So we do have all industry mailing lists and we do reach out periodically. It tends to be a bit like building with Lego. It's a person, you know, it's a bit at a time. I think in the sort of we've probably grown membership revenue by about 15 to 20,000 in the last couple of years, which is, you know, testament to the team's hard work. And you see little bursts of it, but the difference between those little Lego brick increments compared to a couple of big investments, you know, are kind of, it's night and day. So I think we're now at the stage where we feel we're kind of having to really look at maybe new ways of doing things and new ways of pursuing kind of bigger chunks of investment, and how we make ourselves relevant to justify that. But yes, we were open to any ideas for how we can bring in new memberships.
Just concluding, Chair, you know, the COLA from the charging for licensing is one of the lowest in the whole of Scotland, you see, with regards to the license fees that are being charged in other areas. That's what I think anyway. And I have no idea how much the COLA take in on licensing, whether it's cost neutral or are we getting any additional benefit from it. But I understand it's for a 3-year period, so it will have to be renewed, you know, as part of ongoing costs to the COLA.
Okay, thank you. Connie, Francis Murroch.
Thank you very much, Chair. You mentioned in your last response there, Sarah, visitor levy, and I noticed in page 7 of the brochure there, you talk about consideration and development of an island appropriate visitor levy. So quite interested to hear your thoughts on that one. Going back to something else that was mentioned earlier, as a young student, I spent all my summers working in a family shop, and I don't think anybody would have done anything other than answer the questions of tourists, because A, you know, it was just the right thing to do in a service type industry, and B, if you had an angry old uncle bearing over you, making sure you were being polite to the people you were serving, you did it anyway. But I don't think that should be seen as a problem in any way, and I'm sure most people are happy to do it. However, I think one of the things that what I like about this brochure and what you've said is you've put our communities at the heart of it. Sometimes I feel a bit despairing when I see online some of Visit Scotland's representations of the Western Isles. There's no human beings, beautiful pictures, but there's no human beings. And if you come off a cruise boat or off the ferry, off a plane, and you expect to see no human beings, then you're probably going to be a bit shocked by some of the developments that might be coming along the line. And I think it's only right that we, as you're doing here, make sure that that's one of the challenges we're looking at, how that's incorporated into the tourism in the future. And it shouldn't be an off-putting thing. You know, people shouldn't come here and expect us to be preserved in aspic and kept in a cupboard somewhere. You know, we want to portray ourselves as a thriving community. Of course, we're very open to tourism. We're very dependent on tourism, but it's got to be a two-way process.
Yeah. Siar?
With regards to visitor levy, I think we are pretty much on the same page as our counterparts in Orkney and Shetland, and also I think with local authorities in feeling that a port of entry levy would be the best route to explore initially. We are very upfront in saying that as an organisation, for all the reasons that I've just set out in the presentation, we are supportive of there being some form of investment back into tourism. When we first presented on our thoughts on how a levy should be shaped, we went forward and said we don't think it should be percentage based, and ideally for the islands we would be looking at something that is port of entry based rather than accommodation led. And obviously what we ended up with was an accommodation led percentage based levy model, which is really difficult to enforce. So there was a very, very strong feeling in feedback from communities that that was not fit for purpose in the islands. I think we would agree that the burden of responsibility for collecting via small accommodation businesses is not fair. It would leave out probably at least a third. I can't not able to do the maths that quickly. We've got the figures now, but in terms of if you don't collect from all motorhome visitors and you don't collect from all campers and you don't collect from all cyclists who are camping and you don't collect from cruise passengers, you are missing a huge amount of potential revenue from our sector. So we were never really in favour of that accommodation based levy, and I'm grateful that the Corps have taken a sort of pause on considering that. We do think a low level fixed rate port of entry model could potentially work, and it's encouraging that Orkney and Shetland also agree. So we've put that forward in writing, and we kind of wait to see. You know, obviously that came back on the table with the cruise consultation, and could take a while yet. But probably a good point to say that is, you know, we were at one point in terms of our sustainability looking at levy as a little bit of a golden goose that was coming down the line. So we were thinking a few years ago, right, we can survive for 2 or 3 years while they work out how a visitor levy is going to be applied. And now we're in a situation where quite rightly, it is now not going to be applied, and it could be another 3, 4, 5 years, maybe never, for a visitor levy to come on stream. So that has left us in a slightly difficult position, in as much as we were looking at that at one stage as a solution.
Thank you. Councillor Macaulay.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you both very much for the presentation. I don't think anybody today is going to find a magic wand to find the funding that you're looking for, but I totally agree with you about the port. It's been a way of collecting the funds, but it obviously, drawing our attention to it like this, I think it definitely warrants us to be working with you in some kind of capacity a wee bit more in the future, just to see if we as a council can help you to try and bridge that gap that you have, because it's a very important role that you're playing for the tourists and for the islands. I do have a question for you. Apart from that, is you mentioned there in your presentation the ferry and air routes, obviously the capacity being constraints on us all. I think I saw a clip there. Did you say it was between 55% capacity per night or something like that for 57? Yeah. So the capacity, there's obviously a huge amount more tourists that we can accommodate if we can get them here. And my question is, have you or can you collect any stats or evidence of the amount of people that try to get on here? I'm thinking now of Calmac, who are sailing with boats with only 80% on them and telling everybody they're full up. And yeah, is there any way they're obviously not collecting any stats? There must be hundreds of people out there who click on the website, see it's full, and just go somewhere else. I don't know if that's within your remit, or is it something that you can collect as a matter of talking to your members, which I will join. Guilty. Is there any way that you can do that to maybe put pressure on the people that take all our tourists to the island to get more capacity and not to be sailing and telling people that their ferries are full?
Yeah, thank you. It's fascinating, isn't it? Yeah, CalMac do actually, they're fairly generous with their figures. Yeah, we can see that, you know, the capacity, and they're carrying figures each year, which they do put in the public domain. It's interesting, however, what we can't do with them is break it down into visitors and islanders or workers. So it's quite difficult. We know, for example, that, you know, there's 290,000 people came into Stornoway Port last year on a ferry. But what percentage of visitors, workers and islanders that is, it's quite difficult to say. What we've done with the figures that we've given to you today is to use the winter as a base for, okay, the winter carrying statistics are islanders and workers, and then obviously the visitors come mainly between April and October. But you're right, there is more capacity within the system. I own a B&B here, so it would be good to be able to trade all year round. We choose not to, but we are at capacity between April and October. But one of the ways as an island group to increase tourism is to extend the season into the winter. Now that comes with its own issues with storms and ferries being cancelled and what have you. But there is certainly a passion within visitors to come. It's a different visitor set. It tends to be people who want to come and do photography or look at the wildlife in the winter, or to look at the Northern Lights. So it's a different visitor to our traditional summer visitor. But you're right, there is capacity to expand. However, CalMac do insist when their deck space is full at 100%, we all know it's only 80% full. And it was interesting that we had actually met with the CalMac board a couple of months ago to discuss that, and the fact that they actually need to overhaul, whilst they have overhauled their ticketing system, it's a fairly new ticketing system, it's still not robust enough. And we have pointed that out to them.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Steele.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the presentation. Just on the same point that Ian was making, and you touched on yourself, CalMac. I mean, there's a very simple way they can scrape their data, and that's HS postcodes. So,
Yeah.
You know, it's very straightforward. They could actually do that with what they have at the moment. So they could, if they wanted to, they could provide you with that. The other point I was going to make was the other element you mentioned was air and flights. I mean, I hear more and more often that people are being put off on coming to the islands because of how much it costs. Even with the air discount scheme, the cost to get backwards and forwards to the mainland is absolutely extortionate, and the figures without the air discount scheme are eye-watering. So I think there's something that needs to be done. I don't know if Scottish Government need to intervene. We have road equivalent tariff. Do we need to do something on ensuring the future of our islands are in terms of visitor numbers and people being able to get backwards and forwards, residents as well? In terms of a proposal along the lines, we have a air discount scheme which does work for residents, but you know, if we're looking to boost the tourism economy, I think there's something that needs to be done around the air services as well.
Just on the back of that question, what representations do you make to government as an industry in terms of these challenges, in terms of air and capacity on ferries?
Tend to be more responsive, I would say. So we will feed into consultations. We will respond. You know, obviously the ferries have been an ongoing challenge now, and you know, we are involved in various forums. We feed in, you know, on behalf of members. We make a concerted effort to put forward. You know, there can be some quite niche but very important issues that come up specifically around tourism. You know, we don't have issues with how many bikes they can get to Barra. That is a problem. That is a bottleneck. It constrains people wanting to do the Hebridean Way. So there are sort of some specific issues like that we will take forward. And as I say, a lot of what we do is kind of working through, yes, I say responsively. We work closely with Scottish Tourism Alliance, who have a direct line into government, and co-chair the industry leadership group at a national level. So we meet with them quarterly, and we have a really good relationship with them. They're very, very supportive. And also, it's worth saying that it works in converse as well, in that they are reliant on us, and I mean all partners in the room, to be part of that information flow. So they need to know what's happening at a regional level, and that is something that is less less effective now that Visit Scotland have a different focus. So actually the role of DMOs in terms of feeding in the regional picture as well as how we represent to government, it's a kind of two-way flow of information.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, this will be the final question.
Yeah, thanks again, Chair. Sorry to keep this discussion going on a wee bit longer. You mentioned that about 10 minutes ago, the impact brackets, challenges and opportunities of the capacity issues that we're going to be facing due to the renewables projects that are coming off. We know that there are going to be constraints on how much traffic the ferries and the planes can take with the additional volume of people who will be visiting the islands. Are you happy? I know you've been speaking to Anne about the discussions. We're integral to this conversation as well because of the impact it's going to have across not just tourism but everything else it is that we do. Are you talking to the right people? Do you think you're talking to the right people? Can we do more to help you? These are conversations that are important going forward. You know, I know Anne is aware of the issues, and I know she's spoken to yourself, Sarah. But are you happy with the way we're getting involved? Could we do more? Are we having the right conversations? I know you would probably want to take this away and maybe come back with it, but we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to help you, because we see the capacity issues are going to impact everything over the next 4 or 5 years. So we need to have these conversations with the likes of the port, with Calmac, with Loganair, with the carriers. So you know we need to be involved, and we need to be talking together so that we don't have people excluded from the conversation. Okay.
I think, yes, there's a fuller answer that we can come back with, but definitely I feel over the last couple of months the conversation has really ramped up in a much more constructive way. So what was a little bit woolly perhaps at the start of the summer, we now feel we've got a much clearer indication of. We're not entirely sure how it's going to impact yet. We have some developers who are very clear that they do not want to impact on visitor accommodation, which is very noble and to we're grateful for. But then we also don't want frustrated tourism businesses who are sitting with empty properties because they still can't get their visitors over because the ferries are full. So it's a little bit of a ball of wool still to be untangled, and we'll know more, I think, as we get clearer on timelines of big developments and so on. But we are having those conversations. I think the key thing is for us to continue to be in the loop, and again, not to keep bringing it back to money, but we are really clear that there are going to be constraints. It's inevitable. There will be disruptions in Lewis and Harris. It is potentially a big opportunity for Euston Barra. I don't want to jinx anything, but hopefully we will have improved ferry services on those routes in the not too distant future. So with improved ferry access and a very authentic visitor offer, and less capacity availability in Lewis and Harris, then Euston Barra have an opportunity there. That is something that we know we could package beautifully. That is something we know we can sell. That is something we can work with the communities in Harris and Euston Barra to really promote what they have. But we can't do that on nothing, and we can't do that on air, and we need to be around in 2 years' time or whenever the things kick in to be able to manage that. So yeah, the planning element, I think, is starting to come together. But we just want to make sure that we're there to kind of see, feed into how that needs managed.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you both for coming with us today and sharing your presentation. That was a good discussion, and we want to ensure that we continue the partnership that we've enjoyed over many years and continue that dialogue. So thanks again. Thank you. Bill Bale, Günther Nemawin, ek 3 point geheen. No, but je Günther is een haspenig. Ek 3 point geheen. Tap alive. Ik was het kus bij de keer. Versuch mu schema plan lesachi 2025. Is kapasig. En als zo schiedig unter schema kapasig. Wave schema plan lesachi 2025. Sahana McKeever is Marine Keever on a show is on Greenish in Irish is Fragiat Christian to be. You Mary, I go green. Okay, sorry. Can't hear the translation. Okay, I'll carry on in English for the time being. So we're at item 4. It's a development plan scheme for 2025 update. Okay, Brini Mari is nice.
Thank you, Chair. This report is largely procedural. It's just reporting back following the linked report from the June series. As a reminder, the development plan scheme is the annual statement setting out the programme of work and engagement to deliver the development plan, including the local development plan. The consultation related to draft participation statement elements of the DPS set out the engagement aspects. There was limited response to the consultation. With response has been largely positive and no necessary changes. So we'll now, subject to approval, we'll seek to publish the DPS and send it to ministers in government as we're obliged to. We've also used this report as an opportunity to familiarise members with their role in the development planning process as set out in section 7 of the report. This can be both structured through committees, workshops and reports, but also more indirectly in their capacity to engage and encourage communities and stakeholders. For example, we have a number of development plan consultations running currently around call for sites, call for ideas, the place efficiency strategy. So I'd encourage members to engage in that process and to promote it within their communities. We also set out in the report in section 7 the upcoming opportunities for members' participation in the current evidence report stage of the plan. Just to caveat things slightly, I would note that due to caseload pressures in the wider planning service and continued recruitment issues, there's a requirement for my own support to the development management team currently, and this is impacting on the work of the development planning team. And now programme for the new LDP and evidence report. Just happy to take any questions.
Tapeleit Samari, session Tordestech has now gehoord de lessen zijn nakken maar de veil. We hebben een hanne uit Kutjoch ne hoog en hadden pijn maar skippig lessen nu hoog en zijn oper haar horsig hadden. Kisse biek buil ik naam zo. Anna Hill ha wil builig guntig die de mooie nek 3 pointen hun. Live usbare koik nog jawchi en als zo is on fustig ze nog dan groene ik gimmene tastar a gavel gu jeelke die aardig een brisig smaak jawchi fugne heel aan Siar uit de vuistig oog uur kalnach konanten jawchi heuflesige moore uit Frusnachel Annet of Brinische Kusparasho.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the reports for noting at this stage, really just on the basis that it's important that members are aware of the challenges being faced by the planning service in relation to an increasing number of breaches of planning control across the islands. So members are being asked to note that there is no dedicated enforcement resource within the service, and it is providing a challenge at the moment. The service can only really respond reactively and is needing to apply a level of prioritisation in terms of responding to issues that are being raised with the planning service. So it's hopefully useful context for members, given that you yourselves will be facing queries from individuals within your own communities regarding some clear breaches of planning control, and the service is aware that this lack of resource means that there may be a perception that some individuals are being unfairly singled out for attention while others are being overlooked. But this is not the case. The service is obviously just doing its best to work through the cases that are being raised with it. More positively, there are opportunities to put additional resource into planning enforcement, particularly in relation to scope for a discharge of conditions post within the service, potentially funded from private sector contributions. So should this be achieved, we think there's scope to build a planning enforcement role into that post. So just really to assure members that the service is looking at solutions in terms of this issue, and hoping that increased resource can be allocated to planning enforcement in due course. I'm happy to take any questions.
Tapolate, Sana. Plonische News McCormick.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'm pleased to see that some of our developers are assisting us to make this step forward. And I appreciate that obviously we couldn't use the same developers to fund any issues we have in the general planning service. But I think we did have a report earlier suggesting that we were getting some assistance further. I just wondered whether we were indeed receiving the assistance that was referred to then, and whether we've been able to plug the major gaps that we have in the planning service.
There has been funding identified towards a major projects planning officer. Unfortunately, that role has now been advertised twice and there haven't been any suitable applicants. So the challenge is attracting suitable candidates. So we're currently looking at the opportunities to enhance that role with, for example, a relocation package, and there's currently discussions with HR on that. There's also been some support from the Scottish Government's Planning Hub to fund some specific pieces of work around the current SSCN application. So, for example, on the visual impact assessment side of things. So there are pieces of work that we're getting some additional funding towards.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Is there potential there for the timetable that SSEN are hoping to proceed by being held up by this difficulty in finding appropriate planning officers?
I'm not aware at this point in time that that's going to happen. As Mary alluded to earlier, Morag is dedicating more time to that. So at present, we're just redistributing work within the service and trying to move forward on that basis. So no impact at the moment.
And may I just add impact on local applications that are out with the major developments?
No impact at the moment on local applications.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Phil, just speak Danielle on a hill. Phil Boyle, Kuntuch in Ash, Hort Fanier. Appelive, as niet zo goed als Siar, Shabbat coins nog in Nichin Anuachel, Co Ummert. Samische Goal U, as a Kuspa Sami Fakal, in Homer is be near Nech Karoch Goal in Haar.
Told you wouldn't have to wait long. Right, folks. This is a report of the Chief Officer of Economic and Community Regeneration. Anne, are you going to lead us through this? Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. So the report in front of you, it's seeking to provide an update to members on the community ownership joint venture and to seek approval for Comhairle representation in its initial delivery structure. I'll just highlight some key points within the report. So as outlined in the executive summary, there's been good progress over recent months. The joint venture steering group's meeting regularly and there is a project officer in place, and it's now proposed to move from the informal joint venture steering group into a properly constituted legal entity. At the moment, it's believed that the most straightforward approach is a limited company, and the report seeking approval of the Comhairle to participate in the new structure, with the 3 elected members who are currently sitting on the steering group being nominated to sit as directors on what will be called Eilean Siar Energy Limited. So there's further detail on that at paragraph 7.6 of the report. The report also covers some other considerations and some kind of emerging issues in terms of revenue returns and timescales that it's important to put before members at this stage. So I think firstly, it's important to note that there is still financial due diligence to be done, and there's some work being commissioned around that. There's still a lot of work to do, and it may be decided not to take up the shared ownership offer in full or at all. So there is still work to be done on the financials. We don't know the costs of taking up the shared ownership offer at this stage, so we don't know how much it will cost to buy in. And leading on from that, the rate of return and the timescale of return, it certainly won't be until after project construction. So we're looking at 2030 onwards in terms of any return from the investment. Importantly, and as noted at 8.3 of the report, there has been an initial high-level discussion among the steering group in terms of the key principles around future dispersal of revenues. And this has been supported by an initial discussion paper, which is shared with you at Appendix 1. So I just want to highlight to members that these principles have not been agreed and they're still being discussed by members of the steering group. But it does pose questions on the most appropriate use of revenues, and also highlights that there may be a need to revisit some historic understandings of the geographic and percentage split of any revenues that do come in. So through the joint venture steering group, there's been some reference to a 75%, 25% split having been agreed in the past. But I think the feedback from the Comhairle representatives on the joint venture steering group is that this needs to be put back on the table and discussed again. So these discussions are ongoing, but certainly, although it's an early stage in terms of knowing what the revenues might look like, I think it's clear that the members of the steering group want to agree these principles before they go any further into the discussions. So hopefully that's helpful. Key area of activity over the next 6 months will really be getting more work done on the legal structure and also the financial models. There's been a lot of discussions with potential funders and financial institutions, and they've been extremely promising. So good progress and some encouraging feedback from potential investors. I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor McCormack.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. This is the most detailed information we've had on this particular project since it was first mooted, and it's interesting to see how the thinking is evolving at the minute. I have myself reservations about the suggestion in 275 regarding the membership of the steering group. And the ultimate membership, of course, of the organisation that will manage all of this. It is my view that of the 3 organisations currently involved, only the Comhairle has got the knowledge and understanding and experience really to deliver on something as major as this. And it is my view, whether it be agreed with anybody or not, that the Comhairle should have the principal role in this particular project. That'll be for discussion in the future. And I noted at 8.2, we're going to secure independent advice, and maybe part of that independent advice will be in regard to the membership of the board, which is eventually set up. In terms of finance, it would be good if a lot of that finance were coming from GB Energy, for example. That would be a very helpful addition, because I really don't want to well, I won't be here anyway, but I don't want to have this council having to borrow vast sums of money to get into this project. I would be uncomfortable with that myself. But if there are funders prepared to come in and be part of that, then the amount of money that would come from it with external funding would not be anything like as much as if we could fund it ourselves. The point I'm making is that when you're involved in this type of project, when the money starts coming back, the first chunk of money goes to the people who have lent you the money in the first place. They have to be repaid in the first instance. And if we can get a chunk of money put in from a government source, that will reduce the amount of payback to funders that we would have to make in the future. I have some reservations about the project, I suppose, is what I'm saying. But thank you very much for the report. Takes us forward a bit. Thank you.
And thanks, Councillor McCormack. Councillor Finnegan.
Thanks, Chair. I was just wondering how the creation of this affects Hebrides Energy in terms of its role in the future, and is there some overlap with what they're doing already in a way?
I don't think there is any overlap at the moment, because really it's the main consideration at the moment is being able to acquire the ownership stake in the 20% offer from Stornoway Wind Farm and Ushinish. So the joint venture is not looking at supply, local energy supply or anything like that at this stage.
Thanks, Anne. Ray.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I agree actually with most of what Angus said. I think we've always looked really to get the maximum benefit, obviously. And, you know, what we've heard in the past has not by any means seemed to be a justifiable amount. So obviously the more we can get, the better. But the other thing is, I also agree with Angus that I think that council should have a greater stake in this, or a greater say, because obviously, you know, we've got the experience behind us, and we've been involved in it over the years. So yeah, I agree on both these points.
Thanks, Councillor Mackenzie. Kenny, were you wanting in?
Thanks, Chair.
Councillor
Yeah.
Spout.
Just on that 7.5, I think, yeah, 3 representatives for the Comhairle against 6 for the other 2 trusts. The Comhairle is here to serve the whole community of the Western Isles, whereas the 2 other groups have specific areas, Stornoway Trust for Stornoway and Moyville for their area, but 6 against 3 for anything, and we're looking to get the maximum benefit for the whole of the Western Isles. I think the casting vote in there should be with the Comhairle as the overall authority, because the impact of renewables is getting felt and will be felt throughout the Western Isles, and that benefit needs to be spread throughout the Western Isles as well, and ensure that we as a council have say in how that money is being spent to the benefit of all our communities, not just those closely affected by it.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Do you want to go in now?
And on a couple of points raised, so just to confirm to Councillor McCormack that there have been some discussions with GB Energy, and that's gone well. So that is in place. I think regarding the membership of the company, it's probably just a case of the 3 representatives from the Comhairle looking at how that works out in terms of voting rights and things like that when it comes to it. the offer is in relation to the Stornoway wind farm and the Ushinish wind farm. So that's reflected in terms of the current membership of the joint venture steering group. But I appreciate the point regarding impacts across the whole of the Outer Hebrides, and I think that's coming through from the Comhairle representatives on the joint venture as well, that balance needs to be there and appropriate.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. Councillor Hussain.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think it's just in the same vein of most of the interventions at the moment. I think my concern is about the existing geographical split at the moment and obviously limitation of spread of revenue around the Outer Hebrides, especially in my position where I think looking at, I know it's up for discussion again, but the 75-25, I think especially with the risk that the council, the Comhairle will be taken in terms of the major sort of borrower and different things like that. I think that will be very risky and probably unacceptable to most of us. I think the other thing is that the democratic deficit, I think, and I don't know who mentioned that decisions about major investment will be taken out with this chamber. Obviously, that this new company will be independent and have their own priorities. So their own priority might not be the priorities of the strategic priority of the Comhairle. That will be decided by elected members representing the whole of the local authority. So that's for me, and I think added to what my friend from Harris there said about the split into the membership, 6 votes against 3, which could mean any future decisions about investment will lay more or less around here, and and that will be the reality. Thanks.
Thanks, Mustafa. Anne, would you like to come back?
Yes, I'll just come back in terms of strategic priorities. So one of the things that it has been agreed would need to be in place would be an investment plan. So there would be an opportunity for that to come in front of the Comhairle, so that the Comhairle could be clear that the investment of any revenues would be in line with its own strategic priorities and have the opportunity to feed in that way. So there should be alignment there going forward.
Thanks, Anne. Yeah, Councillor McCormick, I'll let you in after Councillor Murray's waiting online. Gordon.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for the report. I think it's a very important report on the community ownership joint venture and establishment of the Eilean Shared Energy Limited. I think we've really got a great opportunity, a tremendous transformative opportunity for our islands, and the potential to control 80 megawatts of renewable energy, which I think would be the largest community-owned wind energy project in the UK, I think is an excellent opportunity. But with that would come a huge responsibility as a council to ensure that this project delivers meaningful, equitable and lasting benefits for our community. So I've got a few questions just I wanted to ask about how will Eilean Shared Energy Limited prioritise initiatives to combat fuel poverty within its investment plan. I know the potential revenues from 80 megawatts of community-owned energy are significant, but I think we've got to ensure that they directly alleviate the burden of fuel poverty. So will we see specific funding allocations for energy efficiency programmes, retrofitting homes, or subsidising energy costs for low-income households? And I think this is something that we have to commit to, targeted interventions, such as energy bill subsidies or community-led renewable energy schemes that reach our most vulnerable residents. Second, I think, as has been mentioned, we've got to address the question of equitable wealth distribution. And I want to ask, how will the investment plan ensure that revenues are distributed to promote long-term economic resilience across the entire Outer Hebrides and not just short-term gains for specific groups. I was going to mention the 75%, 25% revenue split, but I'm glad that maybe it has to be revisited through hopefully robust community consultation to ensure that it reflects current needs and fosters fairness. I wanted to also say that maybe we should consider a wealth fund that might, or endowment model that could ensure that revenues are preserved and distributed sustainably and securing prosperity for future generations. So I think also community engagement is a cornerstone for this. So my last question would be, what is the timeline and methodology for the community consultation process to shape the investment plan, and how will it ensure representation from communities beyond the directly impacted areas, as has been mentioned previously? So I support the recommendations to note the progress of the JV, but I think we've got to commit to rigorous oversight, inclusive consultation, and obviously our relentless focus on combating fuel poverty. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. So yes, there will be a partner, stakeholder and community consultation to inform the development of the investment plan, and there'll be, as I mentioned, specific engagement with the Comhairle as part of that. I would imagine through the community consultation and consultation with yourselves that some of the themes that you've mentioned would come through very strongly in terms of energy efficiency, tackling fuel poverty and retrofits. So obviously too early to say, but I would imagine that these themes would be coming through strongly in the consultation and would be reflected in the eventual investment plan. Regarding the timescale for the investment plan and the kind of community consultation on that, I think that's probably one for discussion at the JV steering group. It's a case of timing it correctly. I would say there's a lot of different community consultation going on at the moment. So probably not this within the next 6 months, I wouldn't say. I feel that would be too early, but it's one we can put on the agenda of the next joint venture group in terms of a timescale for that.
Thanks very much. I understand about the timing, but thanks a lot for your responses.
Thanks, Councillor Murray. Councillor McConnell.
Thank you for letting me back in again, Chair. I just wanted to observe that it's interesting that the two organisations that have the offer have come to this organisation to work with them. Now, that suggests to me that they're not altogether comfortable going forward on their own. And if we are going to take a lead role, which I think we should take a lead role, then we have to be in a position where we can exercise that role in an appropriately constructed group. Thank you.
Leader.
Thank you, Vice Chair. That's been really useful commentary, because when we're sitting in the JV, we are having these discussions, but it's really useful to hear from the committee on what the views of members are. The points about 75-25, I think, have been well covered today. And actually, I think the point Councillor Gordon Murray made about, if we're going to be looking at alleviating fuel poverty, I think the 75-25 actually creates a hurdle for us, something we're going to have to work around if we're going to have a 75-25 split, if we're wanting to address fuel poverty for the whole of Western Isles. So I think it's kind of thing that probably has to come out of the discussion just now, and there might be a way we can put multipliers in for certain areas if it's a bidding process for projects. But I think the feedback from community engagement and whatever the investment plan is going forward shouldn't really be hampered by figures that are thrown in. I think it should come naturally through the process, and as it's Eilean Siar energy, I think there would be an expectation that it would be to benefit Eilean and Anir, or Eilean Siar, or Outer Hebrides, or Western Isles, or everyone we are. Thank you.
Thanks, Leader. Yeah, I think the first mention of 75-25 was well before my time on any of the committees I've been on with regard to renewable energies going forward, and I think I discussed this with the leader yesterday, actually, and the whole purpose of our entering into the joint venture was that the money benefit the entire Western Isles and not just a particular area of Stornoway and North Lewis, maybe bits of Harris. It was to come into the corners that we could redistribute it with projects that we've identified that can be beneficial to the whole of the Western Isles. You know, we're not just going to go into this and say, yippee, we've got some money, let's do something with it. We need to identify the projects and the uses we're going to put the money to. I think through the discussions here, we're right about who is the principal borrower of the capital required to invest in this and how that sits with the governance of the makeup. We'll need to go into discussions about that, obviously, going forward as well. But to my mind, we're getting to a stage where hopefully somewhere along the line we'll be able to identify how much it is we're going to need to borrow, how much that borrowing is going to cost us, how much the projected cost of energy is going to be realised over the 80 megawatt stake that we have, and how much the potential revenue could be within a ballpark figure. At the moment, we're kind of talking woolly, but somewhere along the line, we need to put flesh on the bones of this. It can't go on forever being an indefinable, unquantifiable amount of money. We need to know, are we going to make money back on our investment? So these factors come into it. We're hoping to buy into a de-risk project where all the construction costs, all the risks, etc., have already been mitigated by the developer. We're taking part. We're buying into a completed project. But at some stage, we're going to need to know exactly what it is that we're doing and how will it benefit us. So I think, given the representations made in the chamber today, you know, that we'll take this away to the JV for further discussion, and obviously we will be, I think the word used was robust in our discussions with our partners, because we need to make sure that we are benefiting. From my perspective anyway, the whole objective was to benefit the entire Comhairle and not specific areas of the Comhairle with our share. You know, my take on this is, this was to help us move things forward for the rest of the Western Isles as well, who don't have access to these particular projects. So, Councillor McInnes, you want to?
Yeah, just following on what you were saying, Chair, you know, I think we've reached a crossroads at the moment, you see, by Eilean Siar Energy being set up, and we really didn't have anything to take to the Comhairle until that was set up. And I fully agree. It's 2 meetings back that we did hear about the 75-25 split. I hadn't heard it in this chamber before, and then they said it was earlier on, but Murnival didn't come on board till after 2019, so it must have been initially with Stornoway Trust that those initial discussions did take place. And I certainly think as a Comhairle that following on from what Councillor McCormack was saying, it's clear that both organisations have seen the Comhairle as the professional lead body that will take this forward and has the expertise to do that. The investment plan, I'm sure the project officer we do have will put together the flesh on the bones you were talking about of the investment plan, which will come to us at the Comhairle and to the other trusts as well, you know, Stornoway Trust and Murnival. And everyone will have an open discussion on the type of projects that need to go ahead. And as Councillor Murray says, you know, alleviating fuel poverty is paramount to the whole Western Isles and not unique to any part of it. So collectively, I think we all move forward with a full understanding that we work for the benefit of the whole community. And I think round the table that can be discussed, and the reasons why the Comhairle should have the lead organisation. But I must stress, you see, that some other body like Western Isles Development Trust or whatever will have to be formed on the back of, you know, the way that funding will be distributed, and there will be, as the leader did say, an opportunity probably of giving additional weightings to some projects over others, because not all projects will have a similar priority within the Comhairle as we move forward. But I'm confident that the direction of travel at the moment is the right one, and that more and more information will be coming on the back of this. And it was clear from the project officer, the news in the finance world was very, very positive to engage with the new company, and discussions that have taken place with GB Energy has been very positive, because they have, or should have, a community involvement body that should, and this is an excellent example of a model in community ownership of 80 megawatts. That would be a model for the rest of Scotland and many other communities in the UK to mirror and take forward for the benefit of their own communities.
Absolutely. I mean, I look forward, hopefully, I don't know will I have any part of it, of putting the flesh on the bones financially of what it is we can do when we realise, the potentials of this particular scheme. Alleviating fuel poverty, I think, goes across Angus's particular remit. Councillor Murray mentioned it. It's the biggest thing that's affecting us in the Western Isles. It affects a huge proportion of our households. So, as a primary objective, that has to be, the first one we look to work towards trying to eradicate. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not a member of the committee. I'm a bit unsure about Eilean Energy and who's funding the exploration of the potential benefits and disbenefits of taking up the 20% ownership. They're a private limited company with one director at the moment, and as I understand it from this, that they're going to be doing some exploratory work. So how's that been funded?
Thank
you, Councillor.
No. Somebody put your mic off. Yeah. There you
go. So it should have been approved by now. There's been an application made for CARES funding. So that is to get financial advice and legal advice commissioned on behalf of the entity. The directors will change subject to the decision here today, and also at Stornoway Trust and Moorville, where there would be representatives from the three bodies on Eilean Energy Limited. I think, as noted in the report, though, the Comhairle should carry out get its own legal advice and get its own financial advice as well, just to protect its own interests in future. So that is almost a separate piece of work that would need to get done to ensure that there's no risk as a result of the Comhairle's involvement in the entity. But there is funding there for work that's going to be done over the next 6 to 9 months. I think that this has just been set up as an initial vehicle for, especially in terms of discussions with developers. They need to have an entity that they can engage with, but the legal structure may well evolve depending on what funders require, or in terms of what's required for the best delivery, what comes out of that legal advice. So there is scope for things to change in the future. This might just be an interim structure.
Stafford, you want back in?
I think I was just in the same point of around the governance. I think the constitution of the company. So if that company becomes, constituted with the membership we're talking about, obviously in the future, to have any changes to the organization, the constitution, you'll need the approval of the members. So I've got some concern, some reservation there that the numbers of the other members will outweigh the members of the Comhairle, and if we don't go in the same direction, maybe it'll be difficult to change. So yeah, I'm not comfortable at the moment about the governance issue, because I know we talked about different projects and noble project and fuel poverty and things, but all this will not be able to be taken forward if the governance issue is not sorted at the beginning?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hussain. So yes, it may just be an interim structure, but I appreciate that there may be concerns about entering into something that might restrict the Comhairle's interests in the future. So I can speak to Mr. Langley about that. He's been kind of providing advice along the way as well. So I can certainly check in with him just to make sure that we're not doing anything at the moment that might restrict the Comhairle or impact on the Comhairle's interests in future.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor Hussain. I think going forward, any mechanism whereby the Comhairle can be outmanoeuvred on the governance, I think has to be investigated. And I think we all realise the importance of making sure that the structure of this whole governance issue is correct, so that we don't end up in a situation where we are in a position where we can be outmanoeuvred or outpositioned on any future deliberations. Has to be considered carefully. Tammy, you want in?
Thank you, Chair. Has there been any thought and given to creating a sovereign fund or similar? That's, if you're going to get any wealth like this, I think it's something that should be really looked into as an opportunity to.
Thank you, Councillor McNeill. It hasn't been discussed as yet, but again, I imagine that would be something that would come out of the investment plan consultation. It's just about how to invest some of the revenues for the future. So I'm sure that will come through.
Thanks, Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to go back to 7.5 again, the membership of the Joint Venture Steering Group. I think it is important that the Comhairle take the lead on this and we do have more members in there, because I'm just looking at this just now. If it stays the way it is, we've got representatives from Comhairle who are members of Stornoway Trust and vice versa. So we could end up having a stronger, steering group representing one particular element of this than the whole picture if we stick to what we have here. And the same would the Western Isles Development Trust would be the same if we were involved. There are directors from Comhairle Trust who are on the steering group of the Western Isles Development Trust. So there'd be a conflict, I think, we would definitely need to have more representatives from the Comhairle on that steering group.
I think the concerns of the entire chamber are noted with regard to governance going forward, and I think we will be robust in our preparations and our conversations going forward. We need to make sure that we have this absolutely nailed, and that we're not a minority partner in what would be probably our own scheme going forward with regards to the borrowing acquisition that we're going to have to invest in. So I think there's a lot of deliberations going forward that we need to get absolutely correct, and that the chamber isn't blindsided by somebody coming forward and saying that this is how we've negotiated and this is what we've ended up with. We need to be robust in our discussions going forward and how we're positioned on the particular the JV and the energy and share going forward, and all of the subgroups that we're creating. We need to be confident that we can, to our own satisfaction, control our input and how we get the best return for what it is we're going to be investing in.
Yeah, just following you, are we going to amend the recommendation at 3.1 from B? To accommodate what we just said.
Portion A or B or both?
B.
B.
Because if not, we're going to agree what we have at 7.6 at the moment at 3 memberships.
3.1B is basically the Comhairle's representation on it, which is the Comhairle leader, the Comhairle deputy leader, and the chair or the vice chair of sustainable development. That's well, is that the three? I mean, who else are we talking about in terms of wider membership on, Anne?
What's proposed for the initial company is the same as what's in place at the moment for the steering group. There's nothing to say that might not change or evolve in future, but as noted in the report, it's just timely to set up that structure for now. I think if you were going to look for more representation, that will need to go back to the joint venture steering group for discussion. The way it's been set up at the moment is based on 3 representatives from each party.
That is the area of concern I do have, and you've got 3 from each party.
No, not on the Sheer Energy.
Over the joint venture group.
The joint venture group. Yeah, we're not voting on. We're not. That's not part of the proposal, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
Sorry.
Is that in setting up the company, they would become the Comhairle's representatives on Eilean Sheer Energy, and similarly that the 3 existing representatives from Stranraer Trust and also Comhairle would become the initial directors. So there would be 9 directors of Eilean Sheer Energy, is what's proposed.
So McCormack?
I'm not comfortable with that. I think from the outset, as far as the steering group is concerned, you can have the same 9 as you've already got. But as far as the actual company is concerned, if we're talking of setting up the company, then we should set up the company as we want it to be from day one. And in that regard, I think that this quorum must take a lead role.
Yeah, well, maybe I'm wrong here. The chief executive is a lawyer and better at this than I am. 3.1a notes progress with the community ownership joint venture. That's one thing. And B, agrees the Comhairle be centred on the Board of Energy Sheer as detailed in section 7.6. Now in 7.6, it's agreeing the 3 members of the Comhairle to go on to Eilean Sheer Energy. It doesn't say anything about additional representation on Eilean Sheer Energy being made up of 3 people from Comhairle and 3 people from Stranraer Trust. From my interpretation of 7.6, I may be wrong. Am I wrong? 7.5 is the membership of the joint venture steering group, not Eilean Sheer Energy. Sorry.
So 7.5 outlines the membership of the joint venture steering group, and then at 7.6 it's proposing that the representation above will be carried forward into the board structure of Eilean Sheer Energy. Yeah. So that is what's proposed, is that there would be 3 members as per the current
Sorry, I read that wrong. Yeah, I mean, even I'm not happy with that.
Sorry. Can I propose, Chairman, that we make a recommendation that as far as 7.6 is concerned, that we put forward either 6 or 7, whatever the appropriate number would be, to give a majority to the council.
I agree with you, Councillor Mackenzie. I'm not entirely comfortable with the construction of the steering group nor Eilean Sheer Energy directors. I don't know how much is that the view of every member here? I'm guessing it is. So where does that leave us in terms of adopting the recommendation at 3.1? Can we fail to adopt it? Or do we have to come up with a different recommendation?
Chair, that this particular item be held over for discussion at a later point, so that officers and yourself and the leader and others can discuss how best to take it forward.
I like the chief executive.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor McCormack has taken the words out of my mouth. I think this would benefit from a further discussion. We have to bear in mind that the recommendations that are before you reflect the current constitution of the steering group, and there is, I think, probably benefit in reporting the views of the chamber to the other 2 parties and seeing what a way forward may be, because this is not an item, I think, where we want to go back and forward between from one committee series to another. The next committee series is in November, and if something goes forward next week, which is approved but then rejected by others, then we're back into another cycle of meetings. So I think this would benefit from a bit of off-table discussion.
I think you're absolutely right, Chief Executive. I think leader, yeah, I don't think anybody in this chamber is happy with the way the splits are at the moment, and I think it needs to get taken off table for a further discussion. Councillor Murray, you wanting back in?
Yes, Vice Chair. It's either a case of just taking out Part B of 3.1 or making a proposal that we have seven representatives on the board. And I know that the steering group is going to transfer into the directorship. That's how I read it. So I think, as Councillor Mackenzie has said, and I think how the feeling of the chamber is that we need to have a majority because we've got the bulk of the responsibility. We've got to have the bulk of the power as well, I think.
Yeah, I think this needs to get taken off the table for further discussion, Chief Executive.
I suspect the easiest way may be just for the committee to agree 3.1A and note progress and not agree recommendation B until a view has been reached. I'm just thinking ahead procedurally. The report remains on the agenda. If we can resolve matters before the Comhairle meets next Wednesday, good and well, and that may allow the recommendations to be reconsidered. I'll leave it to my governance colleagues to advise whether that means that this meeting should be adjourned for later consideration of this item or how we want to take it forward. But at the moment, I think the committee is not agreed on recommendation B. That's very clear. So you should simply agree recommendation A, but allow the possibility for further discussion before next week's meeting of the Comhairle.
So we are happy to agree 3.1A and take point B away for further discussion. Agreed. Yes, he's been pacing around out there like a tiger. Sorry.
Sorry to be a pain here. If we are going to discuss it again at a committee before next Wednesday, the meeting will have to be adjourned. Otherwise, we will have to call another meeting, which will not meet the 3 clear days requirement. You know where I am with that. So
we have to adjourn.
I'll leave it to my governance colleagues to put that in motion.
Find out and come back to you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just going to nip out. Okay, for a moment. Not finished yet. Okay. If you just say, I'm just going to seek advice from.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to seek advice on how to correctly proceed. Folks, I always wanted to do that. We're going to adjourn this particular item and we'll take it away for further discussion in the hope that we might be able to convene a meeting of the JV prior to, well, as early as possible. We will reconvene with item number 7 and we'll ask the chair back into the room.
As je niet zo goed zit, ga kus per zeg tijdens. Wanneer tijdens is huis bionen gehotig. En hij shot voor tussen gaan holen. Onige tijdens is kussen heertje geen dagie de 24-25 is brini Lorraine Graham of Shinash.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try not to get too emotional as I speak to my last homelessness annual report before Lady Anne just pass this over to her very capable hands. Just to highlight a few issues with regards to homelessness in 24-25, we had a decrease of 7% on our numbers of people presenting as homeless. There were 139 households presented in the year, and that was the third lowest rate of homelessness presentations per head of population in Scotland. Numbers in temporary accommodation were a slightly higher rate, but still below the Scottish average. And the numbers of time spent in temporary accommodation increased in 24-25, but the average times for those waiting to be permanently housed decreased. So that reflects some of the opposing pressures that we see in moving towards the aims of the Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan locally. But an increase in households presenting, this is a very good news story, really, that every year at the end of March, we look at the number of households who are waiting on the statutory homeless list to be housed permanently. And that number was up at over 100 at one stage. But as at the end of March this year, we were at the lowest figure that we've been at for 17 years. And that's due largely to, there was a decrease in homeless presentations last year, but we also saw an increase in the number of allocations being made. 39% of all allocations made by Hebridean Housing Partnership in the Outer Hebrides were to statutory homeless households. I have to say that not all permanent housing solutions are through HHP. A small proportion are housed by trust, and one or two of those will be by authorities elsewhere in Scotland, but the vast majority are through HHP, and we continue to work in partnership with them to try and keep that number going down. We don't want to see the backlog increasing again, and as part of that, they have continued with their agreement that they will permanently allocate at least 25 offers are made to single person households in Stornoway each year. They have agreed to that. So that helps us to keep the backlog down, and it helps us to address the area where there is the most pressure, which is for 2 apartment houses in Stornoway. Just to mention as well that there are ongoing pressures on temporary accommodation despite the positives, and on provision of support, that 49% of households presenting as homeless stated that they had a mental health need, and 28% of those who presented had more than one support need. So support provision is also key ongoing to continue to reduce homelessness and address homelessness issues locally, and happy to take any questions.
Let's Lorraine. Kees, subject dinge. Moeilijke reme kan je. Oh, sorry, Mustafa.
All right.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Mustafa.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Lorraine, and wish you all the best in your new position. And thanks for just a small question for a senior chart in number 1, the reasons for how, sort of people becoming homeless. I didn't say anything. Is not one of the reasons is mental health and addiction that causes people to lose their tenancies and becoming homeless? And if that's the case, is there any views in maybe focusing some special type of tenancy or type of homeless accommodation to deal with this, with mental health and addiction? Thanks.
Yes, so when it comes to mental health and addictions, they're captured in the underlying reasons why somebody presents as homeless. That's how the Scottish Government has classified homelessness presentations. And what we find is that because that data is collected at the initial point of presentation, not everyone is willing to disclose at that stage that they have a drug or alcohol issue. So that number is definitely underreported. People seem more comfortable, interestingly, with stating or disclosing that they have a mental health issue. But those two issues combined, yes, very much impact on us. And we are looking in the local housing strategy at identifying solutions towards that by identifying some sort of supported accommodation ongoing for households. There will always be a small proportion of households for whom a secured tenancy is not necessarily the best solution. So we need to identify some sort of permanent supported accommodation for households with complex and multiple needs, where a secure tenancy is not going to address the issues underlying their homelessness.
Appellate. Commissioner McKay.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, I just wanted to add my congratulations to Lorraine, and you're certainly going out with a bang if that's the lowest figure for the last 11 or 12 years. Yeah. Did you do that deliberately or what?
No, it's just fortunate timing, but it is part of the work of Rapid Housing Transition Plan. This is what we want to see. We want to see the backlog decreasing, because obviously the less people there are in the backlog, the faster people will be moving through the system. But there are ongoing pressures that we are working against to try and continue heading in the right direction. And a lot of that is partnership working with HHP and with support providers. And homelessness prevention is becoming an increasing focus, and you will be aware that the Housing Bill is being debated this afternoon, stage 3 in the Scottish Parliament, and as part of that we will see homelessness prevention duties that will be legislated for, and that will be an ongoing emphasis in addressing homelessness.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, it's interesting that the housing bill is being discussed. Something that keeps coming up in conversation is the local connection and the pressures that adds to local authorities. Is there anything in the housing bill to address that or to look to change it? If it's in, seems to be an awful lot of national discussions that it's not really, potentially not really the right thing we should be doing, or maybe it needs to be reviewed or looked at. I just wonder, is that under review or being discussed?
It's not currently under review as part of this housing bill. Local connection hasn't had the impact that local authorities expected necessarily, but we are seeing an increase in movement across Scottish authorities. And it is important to understand that local connection only applies now it's been suspended across Scotland. So you can move anywhere within Scotland, but if you present from out with Scotland, the authority to whom you present does not have a duty to accommodate you permanently. The Scottish Government are monitoring it, and every month local authorities are feeding back to them how many people are presenting who don't have a local connection with that authority, and they're looking at where they've come from, so that they're tracking movement across Scotland. But it's not a significant concern at present. There are a number coming locally, but the majority are tending to come from out with Scotland.
Appellate. Bill Bail, Günther Gnask, Hort Pagnet. Appellate. Gusper Hook, Aris Parentis Pliono, 20. Cool.
Kenneth's wanting to talk. But,
Kenneth, I didn't see you there.
It's okay. It was just you mentioned that the main demand for housing was 2 bedrooms in Stornoway specifically. Is that because it's family breakdowns and it's a single parent with a child? And given that you know what Stornoway needs, do you have similar statistics for the rest of the chain down to, through Harris, US, Barra? Are they the same in that they need homes with 2 bedrooms, or is it single bedroom homes or 3 bedrooms and so on and so forth?
Sorry, and I'm using housing terminology in the report. So a 2-apartment property is actually a 1-bedroomed house. So that is single person households, and that is because relationship breakdown is the main cause of homelessness. So it will tend to be the man in the relationship who will move it out and leave the mother with the children if it's a family household. So that's why we see mostly single person households coming in, and most of them are men, and most of them are presenting to Stornoway. But there are pressures throughout the Outer Hebrides, and we do have figures for Uist and Barra as well. If you want me to share this with you, I'm happy to do so to show where the pressures are there.
Okay, thank you. Cheers.
Okay, Glevan, tap a live. Snisha Guasat Kukuspa de Hook, Irish Barantus Bliona 2025, Hanashi Shirach Unte, the Irish Barantus Bliona, and a Naibri Shuddervision Urkeren, here in Hortestech, Lishing Hona, here Sonne Kur Fachor, the Realtor Tedish Nahawape, there's Halorena Risto Vrinish Nasho.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So members may be aware that we are required to submit an assurance statement annually to the Scottish Housing Regulator, and that's with regard to how we are complying or not with a number of regulatory requirements relating to housing and homelessness services, equalities and human rights, and tenant and resident safety. So I can advise that we are currently up to date with all the required certificates. So these will relate to gas safety, electrical safety, water, fire, asbestos, damp and mould, and we're therefore in a position to submit our annual assurance statement to the Scottish Housing Regulator if members are in agreement.
Tapping Lorraine will kiss the project in your. Can I show? Ja. Pijlen kunt is een mooie nek 3 pointje heen. Tappen live. Kusper nee kruisjerog kan ik schiedig uiter is refrekkerd na kone die konige realtors na hawape talischen bile kruisjerog is koerst njeren en hawape. De guun kootje wagen en hoofdien in de miljoenen show. Sa een kennen toch een show zo'n brinische naast.
Thank you, Chair. The Scottish Government are seeking views on proposals for changes to existing crofting legislation and the merging of the Scottish Land Court and the Land Tribunal for Scotland. The bill has been developed on the basis that it will simplify crofting. However, it's unlikely that these measures will have much of an impact on reforming crofting law and tackling the major issues affecting crofting and crofting communities. Many of the previous proposals consulted on have not been brought forward, and several fundamental issues that garnered universal support at local meetings have not been addressed. The proposed response was circulated to the Primary Industries MOG and for finalising an approval prior to formal submission. The proposed Collier response is amended to the report. The recommendations are outlined at 3.1, and I'd be happy to take any questions members might have.
Thank you. Any questions? This is really just amendments to an existing bill, and it proposals don't really touch the sides and what is required for reforming crofting, and it's very disappointing. So the Primary Industries Board has already approved this, and Councillor McLean.
Sorry, I don't want to just to develop it, but in 9.1, you're quite as blunt as you should be, yeah. And because it does say that ICR, as the chair has already said today, this proposes, and I've read through them, but not to a significant amount, but it does really nothing to simplify crofting law, and crofting law is really pathetic, to say the word, at the moment. It's totally unreadable for the ordinary person, and you would agree that this proposals here is not doing anything to simplify or anything to help the local crofter in particular.
I would just agree with what Councillor McLean said, that it's some of these major issues that keep coming up time and time again, they're not grasping the nettle at all, and they're not addressing them. And it's really just an exercise in semantics, you know, word changes and shops here and there. So
Thank you. I think with your agreement, we should perhaps send an accompanying letter with our response to Mr. Farley, the Minister responsible for crofting. Just reiterating the points that we are making in the response. You're in agreement with that. Baile Günther, dis na mór ag 3 pointje hyn. Hys bydd y dich iasgoch a nas sio tord fistrach dan hwle tach yn y hyf sgiren madde voor ian as flaschten pneumachus madde. Mis tjeter amach go conchonigig popoch at er na samin miljoen sio is march en avlione. Sa ian er sio ries son brinische nas.
thank you, Chair. On the 20th of August, the Scottish Government's Marine Director gave a presentation to members in this chamber on the various fisheries management measures for over 160 sites in the inshore area, with the majority of these sites in the West Coast and a large proportion in the Western Isles. Members need to be aware of the measures being proposed and the implications of these to the Western Isles. There are a large number of PMF sites where mobile gear will be prohibited, and only a very small number of these sites have been discussed with members. The negative effects that these measures and closures will have will be significant to the Western Isles. The recommendations are outlined at 3.1, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Sian Kishen Sibi, as in the shore east. Donachig Markeneers.
Iedere partij kan in je schont. Hoffig dan nou schon het niet aan de hoed show. As a lonestel. Ach, men hoed dat she jouw bek vista hoe gaat gaan lehingen. Agus kan eens na de gewaardersing tussen hopik vista hoe gaat gaan gehaald geskeld. En daar de woord had wat de machedag kulusvarig gehaald. Agus had wat troinse mij. Agus had het sounder goons men had ik het voor een 10 miljoen dat was hier skiedend kleedjes aan daar wie in de security mag. Had ik het kunnen koeien kunnen schon. Gemile tablion agus wat de graag groot geestig duur. Agus een oorzaak dat had ik een reeltje mag. Had de eerste dat net dit dat was koeien gekraagd. Agus hebben nog eens dat je schon nooit had dat je nu een kanal terug had. Roonje de ik de geblionen die gehaald naar de challenges onwet ze ha ne skieden maar een voor een 10 miljoen had dat je vistig gekast een wachtje mag in de gunja daar dus had de graad naar is een plaats de skieden ik hier zich mjouwla je schon nach verwacht 4 miljoen als een miljoen gehaald dus vaak kiert geleden dan agus de challenges in taschen 10 miljoen ha han gáistor kios schon e 12 miljoen gelé. Agus söle me geld rodigent kalachtes schon troin as een haneltrug akko edortuin schon had gat bistor se mi jen lachen jaren had apport agus skieder schon mag gonne vanke klochtematik. Agus begunis schon me de war as ik hier geloof hoorsing je voor. Kun je het moet je het gelukkig zeggen aan de nieuws van de markt. Doen je het heel zeker ze mij schon. Dus rood de gra had ik kunnen door te schon kleedjes. Bij arg diesel ga je huis bengaar van 5 punt gemanesmo die er ik in 4 jaar van jaar gehad gedelen. Dus kwante kulos Hamis fin had het bij talshow voor de lijntje waarom. Agus has je bij sabbeshow voor een zoals de jeugdplannen 4 voor hoogschatten hasho. Agus ham fin laten is het een spikuriel tussen wist en aflonnen. gur a seo adul I the bhór ma mialu agus dúine sin muna heisiine mar Eilean is taich agus cuanti muna chanas at Islands Community Impact Assessment dul a dúirt agus siúl minute chuirte a sin. Örude chanin ma íon culas fara sé gur bhá de cuant gur seo at skide bheit cáirsteach gur riolaigh agus fa mis is a roimar seo fa yn groundwoord vlionnige agus huad an háirsteach a sin 10,000 Sean plannen mar sin chud chéile chat rein cáirsteach sin had gat fistathe gan a chóle dat op dat steach agus seo seo een graf star sin je fi kan roin agus sule mi go féme sin kuant rodigen man FOI dat a ga je goede steach van a háirsteach begint hu dat Keisje die hit miljoen noemt, Sean. Na me een harm Sean Sean Trodigen nu heb ik een studje ze wil zien nu.
Can you that's very true, Mr. McKinnon. They didn't listen 10 years ago and they're not listening now. And the impact of this on the industry, on the processing industry, on communities, on families is immeasurable in terms of what could happen. So I think it's really imperative that we emphasize about the impact assessment and the local management opportunities that are, and we should again lobby the government and raise our voice on this issue. The short window for consultation over the winter is not acceptable really, and then it runs into the Purda period for the Scottish Parliament elections. So I think we need to take immediate action and raise our voices here, and again perhaps write to Ms. Gujon, who's responsible for fisheries, and raise her voice. With the permission of the committee, I propose we do that. Mr. Kenneth MacLeod Harris.
Appalachian agus matter Mr. McKinnon ha mi kuja de tank Ian Kennedy sin did wasn't the agus golan sin wope chin gan ri hachkin ha immediately had da ene warne die ist wij konden zich gegeerd is en is konden zich pulige dus en hun gewel at komen fallachrouten agus kude gaide in jeskach maar is op de kols vara gatje gehad kude kause de ga jedeskai kude zijn boeie skola de fenken gerosene peken boeie het a gaan rugamische kude in jeskach boeie se bi de zeggen aan de hen ach sé die jeskach gestaat had er jage de gene we zijn sam je gefemes in je wie ieder kassen die is met de wasin je hun gaan je ja davlian as en ik niet PME mag ha jo jaar gedane agus fémis in wie ieder kassen de keer koach kleedje is gewoon maar in Nederland en jo gaan je moet een kleedje gaan schauen hij de moer aan zoele in de narenjach ze boedaking dan hier is geen heen zo'n herken schon bij is aan de komale show is fémis in wie kind jak wel kar maken zoele goed de chance gaan jij wie kees die dunje ik naar Luzeberg en heel en de slogan jo ach Jerry routen gas John over en kar is begonnen je wie keer de goede visser hoe is tegen was zorg af ik gooi je realtors gemoord zetten in nu moeten had via de januari
Can you Ms. MacLeod? Security in the chair
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think we all had a sneaking suspicion that following the partial rebuttal of HPMAs a couple of years ago through the public outcry that was created over the proposals, that this would come back in another guise to haunt us. It would just go round the back door somewhere and it would come back in a reconfigured format to achieve much the same end. It's basically a determination to get rid of anything that's considered invasive to the seabed, i.e. trawling, dredging, etc. I'm sure Static here is quite happy with tangle nets, etc. that are fairly light on the environment. But Duncan has used many an example, or one particular example of Broad Bay, where they barred dredging and trawling in Broad Bay to resurrect Broad Bay, apparently, turned it into a desert of starfish. There's no evidence to suggest that we can't manage our own fisheries and keep successfully moving around the grounds that need rest, so that the populations of shellfish, etc., can regenerate. That's been done, and it's been proven, and we're now getting the best fisheries that we've had in many a year, particularly down in the Sound of Barra and around Uist. So, you know, we've got the evidence that we've managed our seabeds properly, but there's a determination, and this would appear to be a fait accompli already, that there's not much we can do, irrespective of any consultation, about what they're proposing to do to us. And I don't suppose a song will make any difference this time around. We had 4 representatives in here about a month ago, and it seemed to be they were delivering what it is that's going to happen, and whatever the results of any consultation, it won't change the outcome because it's already enshrined in legislation. So the knock-on effect of this couldn't be calculated. They couldn't even tell us how many jobs were going to be affected in the Sound of Barra. This is the same community that are planning on investing X million pounds in a community hub, you know, and they couldn't tell us how many jobs are going to be destroyed as a result of closing the Sound of Barra. So the joined-up thinking here, and you know, committing to close a fishery on the one hand and invest money in a community hub, school, etc., on the other hand, it's skewed thinking, if you ask me. You know, this is to suit a particular agenda. It doesn't meet the needs of anybody here in the west coast of Scotland. And if you look at the map of the proposals for MPAs and compare the west coast to the east coast, there's absolutely no rhyme or reason for the disparity between the proposed MPAs here on the west coast and what's happening on the east coast. Irrespective of bringing proposed offshore wind farms into the equation, you know, you couldn't make it up. It's what we feared, and I think the way it's been done has been by sleight of hand again, and it doesn't appear to be irreversible this time. And I think we should make as much noise as we can. I mean, I bowed to Councillor McInnes and the Western Isles Fishermen's Organisation on how big a noise we're prepared to make about this, and I would suggest that from the Sustainable Development Chair here and the Primary Industries MOUG, which I chair, we should make as much noise as we can. But to what effect? It's almost as if this is banging your head off a brick wall now, because it's almost a done deal. The effect we can have on this is negligible, and it doesn't really reflect well on Scottish Government that they don't take local considerations. We are a small population here in the Western Isles, and our voice, no matter how loud it will be, won't translate into any meaningful numbers that will affect anything they do, but it'll meet the boxes that they're required to tick, unfortunately. And that's exactly what they're going to do. We're going to close X amount of seabed area in Scotland, and the Western Isles will be disproportionately affected, but it doesn't really matter because it doesn't affect too many people. And that's the calculation. That's what's been factored in here. Never mind the fishermen whose livelihoods are going to be affected. So I suggest we make as big a noise as we can.
Thank you. Monica Gordon Moroch, Eilean.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just listening to the debate. I just wanted to ask the officer, is there a local management plan in existence at the moment that could be put forward as an alternative? And that would be obviously suitable to the industry primarily. I think everyone is in agreement that there needs to be some sort of plan going forward in the context of sustainability, and putting a local management plan forward as an alternative would allow local industry to take leadership. Thanks.
Janet.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Not that I'm aware of at the moment. That's not in place at the moment. However, to what the Vice Chair was saying, what we really took from the meeting was that this is done to satisfy legislation. This is not done for a need or to alleviate fishing pressure Again, in the last 10 years, there's in the trawling sector, the boats a whole on the west coast have reduced by 70%. So there's 70% less fishing vessels on the west coast in 10 years. So if you're going to take that amount of pressure away from anything in the environment, 70% reduction in an area, I mean, that's phenomenal. You're winning. So to then come in and implement these measures, you know, just again to satisfy legislation, and they did allude to that they were fearful of being sued, taken to court by NGOs and things, and that was a very big part of the reason that they were doing this. So I don't think any local management plan or anything. However, I would say I do agree that we need to make a lot of fuss about it, and we do need to lobby government about it.
Thank you. Mr McInnes.
Yeah. Just following on from what Councillor Murray was saying, there is a local plan for the Sound of Barra. That was introduced in 1984, and it's a seasonal closure for scallop thatching, which they are proposing to close. So if you look at what they did in 1984 in Broad Bay, they closed that area. And if you compare what they did in Broad Bay and the seabed there and the returns, as I said to those officials, the 39-foot scallop thatcher, Ken Loch, the last week, he was in Broad Bay. He took £4,000 value of scallops in the last week in 1984. I sent the photos to Ian Kennedy of the Marine Scotland Science, went into Broad Bay and had a look in 1997 to have a look at what was on those toes now, and all that's there is starfish. No scallops there younger than 5 years old. So it clearly shows that there's no survival. So they've sterilised the seabed in Broad Bay. And in addition to what the Vice Chair was saying, other than bottom trawling, they're proposing to put a prohibition on the use of nets all the way to the west of Barra, all the way up to the Sound of Harris. So the crayfish fishery, and Ian and I met with representatives from Seafood Coast that have taken over Macduff shellfish from the Canadians. We met them last week, and what they are looking at is they have markets for any amount of whitefish. And as I call it, the Comhairle also have a community quota scheme, which has been well used, as returning in excess of £1 million to the local economy every year with full take-up of that community quota. If there's bottom contacting gear and scallop, but prawn trawling prohibited in some areas, which there will be, it'll mean that there'll be less uptake on quota. And the tangle net fishing that's providing some of the highest value whitefish, turbot, monk, and that won't be allowed to continue because SPAs are marine designations that have been there for about 20 years. There's no management in them, and part of this is that would be prohibited. So it won't give an opportunity of the community here to take advantage of the stock that's particularly to the west of the Hebrides. So it's similar to, I see the land and the sea. If you don't harvest the land sustainably, rushes will appear. And if you're harvesting it sustainably and following, which is what is being done in the Sound of Barra, and it's an example of what could and should be done in other areas. And we've got other local management measures, which I won't go into detail, but we've pioneered clacking devices on board vessels. We've restocked lobsters all around the Western Isles to that the catch per unit effort to the west of US there are catching more lobsters now than they were 50 years ago. So there has been local management, and when we put that forward to introduce that into legislation, they didn't proceed with doing it.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr McInnes. Mr Murray, your hand's still up.
Yes, I want to come back. Councillor McInnes mentioned that they put forward the local management plan and it was knocked back. I think that's what I gathered. I want to ask you, Chair, would you agree with me that a local management plan for the Western Isles would give the local fishing sector a bit of strength in the negotiations? And if the coal and the fishing industry were to work with whatever plans are in place alongside with the Scottish Government, surely that we would all come up with a solution that would be suitable and suit both parties.
We've been calling for local management from the very start, even 10 years ago when the larger MPAs were proposed. We were always calling for a local management scheme because we always knew that the fishermen and the fishing community were the best people to know how to manage.
I completely agree with you, Chair. I completely agree with you. But what one person's saying there's no local management plan in place, and another one saying there's a local management plan in place for a part of the islands. Surely we should come up with a Western Isles local management plan that we could put forward.
We've been saying that all along to the Scottish Government.
But where is the local management plan? Where is it? Do you know?
The local management plan is to be developed in conjunction with the Scottish Government, and that's what we're trying to propose to them and have been for the last 10 years.
Excellent.
And we move now on to Mr. MacLeod.
Yeah, I'll just come back in quickly on that one. Yeah, unfortunately, at the seminar that we had, it was clear, and I think it's already been mentioned, that the biggest driver behind this consultation was nothing to do with fisheries management. It was a fear of the Scottish Government being sued by for their own legislation, which has nothing whatsoever to do with protecting the communities of the Western Isles. It's more about protecting the Scottish Government from potential being sued by environmental organisations. And I think that's already been made clear in the discussion today, and certainly was in the seminar we had here.
Thank you, Mr. MacLeod. Well, I should talk about good. No, I'm sorry, Ms. Atten, we need to move on. I'm sorry. I should talk about good shock you. Several pilot going to reden the Marwinek 3.1. Thank you. Item 11 is the Scottish Government Nature Restoration Fund 2025-26 report seeks approval for the corner to utilise the allocation of the Nature Restoration Fund NRF to support a range of biodiversity and nature-based projects across the Outer Hebrides, in line with the strategic aims and objectives of the NRF as set out in the Scottish Government's allocation letter. Karine McCrory will speak to the report and answer any questions. Karine?
Yep, thank you, Chair. As you said, just seeking the approval for the allocation for the 25-26. The projects proposed this year include work on habitat restoration, sustainable land management and environmental education, and wider community engagement with nature. So collectively, they represent a balanced programme that supports biodiversity and strengthens resilience in climate change. The allocation is fully funded by the Scottish Government grant with no financial risk at all to the Comhairle, but happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you, Karine. Do you have any questions? Mr. McLean?
Thanks, Chair. I'm not on your committee, but it's good to see some of these projects progressing. I can see quite a few of them that would be complementary to crofting. The one thing that I feel quite vexed at really is that there's nothing there to do with goose management. Maybe I should put this over to Mr. Kennedy and ask him to try to get some way or other, because geese, proliferation of geese in crofts is the death knell of crofting. I'll be quite honest with you. You talk about people, whatever, it's to do with geese in the north of Lewis. I don't know what's happening in the Southern Isles, but we in the north of Lewis, as a crofter, I put fields aside to be cut for silage. When I go to them, I can't cut them. They're filthy with geese. So unless we are going to do something about geese, and I'm just finished, sorry, Chair, I'm using this opportunity of getting my gripe in about these pesky birds. Yeah, I'm afraid if I had a gun, I would shoot in the wrong direction. So, but I would say I would actually ask, implore of Mr. Kennedy or whatever, or as a committee, that we do something about geese management. So I'm asking for that. Maybe we should take a professional shooter like Councillor Morrison down to back and call. Yeah.
Yeah, I take your point, and you're correct. But there is a goose management group that's responsible for that, but it's something perhaps we can pursue. Councillor, the shooter himself.
I've declared an interest in this item, but it was to do the North Harris side of things. But you just said what I was going to say. There is a local goose management team. Well, and I think it's Donald McKinnon who's leading on that. So it's in Carway Trust, Colin. So, and there is a local team supposed to be in the area, in your area. So
absolutely not working. All right, Mr. Kennedy, if it's not working, sorry, you haven't my own.
It's something perhaps we can look at it another.
We can start looking at. Ask Mr.
I think the primary industries MOG could have a discussion about.
But certainly, I don't think it's working at all. Well, down our way, it's not working.
Mr. John Norman MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, and thank you for the report. Oh yes, I do agree with you there, Callum, with the geese. If only we had listened to the Ushers around 40 years ago, when they were complaining about it, we might have done something about it then. Anyway, that's not my question. My question was to do with the funding for the nature projects and that. And I note the no fence. How's that distributed? Because I know these fencing colours. I know a fellow just down the road from me there, he's got them. They're around £400 or £500 each. I mean, you're not exactly going to get a huge amount of people with, especially if you've got a lot of cattle on that. How does that work, or how does the money get? Does it go out to the crofters, or how does it work?
Irene, can you come back in on that?
Yep, so once when the Bumbley Conservation Trust were in touch, they were looking for quite a large number, but due to the expense, we thought we would just pilot a smaller number initially to see how it went going forward, and they'd be issued to the crofters.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. The Maureen Rientach 3 Point Cahoon. Item 12 is reports outstanding. That's for noting. So that concludes the meeting, and we're going to apply for item 13.